About Comic Hour with your host, Andrew Honor.
And Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we review the amazing European comic, Blacksad, by Juan Díaz Canales and
Juanjo Guarnido.
Yes. And we are super excited to review this graphic novel. It is written by a couple of Spanish authors, but it was originally published as a French graphic novel that's been translated over. So we thought this would be a cool story to share with some people that have never heard of Blacksad. And we're just kind of developing our range and expanding our reach of just what kind of comics are out there.
We're looking for the international bestsellers now. And Blacksad, a lot of people have probably ran into it through the years or seen at least the main character.
Yes.
John Blacksad. And he's a cat. So, right away, you immediately, even any kind of promotional material or posters or anything that you see online or through the years, you immediately pick up on, okay, he looks like somewhat of a detective. And it's an anamorphic comic. So
yeah,
that's kind of cool setup for, most things. And in our eyes, we were like, let's try it out.
Right. And so this was originally published in 2000 and is over in Europe, things like that. And then it wasn't until recently in 2010 that this actually got translated and published by Dark Horse. And we read one of the first like collected editions I put out, which features 3 stories: Somewhere Within the Shadows, Arctic Nation, and Red Soul. First impressions, Ramos, what did you think of it?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, I think I kind of walked into it where I think most people are maybe in the same boat. I've seen it through the years. I've seen at least his face through the years, Blacksad's face, but I never actually had a chance to flip through it.
Right.
So
look at the interiors.
Yeah, like for me, a lot of times I'll grab a comic, flip through forward, backward, and you kind of get, if nothing else, just the general idea of what the comic is about and the feel of it. And, to me, I have to connect to the artwork, and I have to, a lot of times it's like the story is really good. So it's like, all right, let's muscle through it. But this one, it came up that, we were trying to make our lists for this year, and we thought, well, I mean, Andrew's been a fan of this for a long time. So we kind of
this was actually a second read for me.
Oh, okay. Of the
yes.
hardcover?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I'm supposed to 3 stories in general. I've read this, I think, earlier
like
last
issues,
year.
Regular issues, or no?
No, like the complete stories.
Okay,
I guess that was in here. But this was, so I actually did some extra credit. I guess we started doing a little bit extra credit. But, so this was my second reread of this. But then afterwards, I read volume 4 and 5, and then the second, or I should say the 6th hardcover, called "They All Fall Down,"
which is like,
or
they all fall down.
They all fall down. It's released
part
as, it's a part 1, but it just came out last year. I was already a big fan of the series. I didn't know it was actually a part 6 of the series, but I was so immersed into what the artist and the creator were into. I was like, oh yeah, I'll totally pick this up. And then come to find out, there's actually some more stories in between this. I'm like, okay. And I'm so glad I did, because I actually read, this got me back into reading 4, 5, and then this new volume. Something I probably wouldn't have did unless I had the right motivation or the right time to do it. So I was really glad I read this whole, like, what's out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And back to first impressions for me, once you get halfway through the first story or so, you're like, all right, this is serious. It's got some chops. You just got to dive into one of these. And I think some people might put this, preconceived notion in their head of like, well, it looks like
anamorphic.
It's just a bunch of animals, people. And
no, but this has got some like serious issues. And
really good story. I mean, in the first 2 pages, there's like a murder already, and they're trying to figure it out. So they start strong, and you just jump into this story without much of a background too. It's like you start piecing together things as you go, which I like. I like when it's not like an origin
story by itself is standalone. You don't really have to know too much going into it.
Right.
They could all stand alone. I guess the payoff that you get when you read these stories in, I guess, by volume is that you can pick up like one or two recurring characters.
Yeah. Well, and you piece together a little more about who and what who is John Blacksad.
Yeah, some of the motivations.
They don't start with him as a boy. They don't start
No.
with him like
There's
going
not this
to the
epic, like
academy or
sad
something.
origin
Yeah.
story. There's none
No.
of that. The usual tropes, I guess, of the comic book world.
Yeah. And I also, when I was reading it, I was trying not to connect the characters or the story into other characters and other stories. I
Sure.
just tried to say, okay, this is a totally new world, because
Yeah.
you might say, oh, well, Blacksad's kind of like Constantine, or like, oh, this is kind of like,
Yeah, obviously our favorite detective, Batman.
yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, a lot of this is, we just came out of actually sort of this crime noir.
Yeah, or we just read, Parker by
Yep.
Richard Stark, adapted by Darwin Cook, and it was kind of interesting to see the parallels and just the complete differences of the two styles.
Right. Right. And the story itself was intriguing to me, of like sort of a whodunit murder mystery. And
Yes.
usually in regular comics or movies or something, you kind of get an idea that someone is being shady, or like, oh, that person looks, like a gross villain or something. But in this one, they're all animals. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's kind of cool. You don't pick up on who could be the
No,
villain.
it kind of eliminates those preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Because you know what a face looks like, you know what humans react. How do you portray that in an anamorphic setting? It's hard to read those gestures, but I will say that the artist does well to communicate those as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so the story starts out where John Blacksad is a detective. You get the idea that he's just one of those I don't want to say cliche detectives, but he's one of those, like, he wears a long trench coat.
Yep.
He's
He's a little rough around the edges.
yeah, and he doesn't mind just walking up to someone and throwing them against a wall and
Right.
giving them a couple punches to get his answers.
Exactly.
Right?
And he's not exactly, he's kind of cop. I guess they more portray him as a detective. And
Doesn't look like he really reports to anyone.
no,
either.
I
He's
think
just-
he reports to like the police agency at the time.
But like, he doesn't have a
But-
partner or anyone.
No, he
else.
doesn't have
It's
a
just-
partner.
It's just him.
No, he's kind of he's kind of for hire, things like that. At least that's how he progresses, to my knowledge. But it's really cool, just how the artist connects each animal, and he does it he doesn't do like replicate each animal either. He really tries to tie them with different personalities.
Yeah. So I was kind of reminded of the movie Zootopia. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever seen Zootopia all the way through. It's a kids movie.
Yeah.
But it does have sort of the same idea where
Okay.
they take certain animals and they give them traits. Like, there's a fox in it, and he's very sort of deceiving.
Okay.
And then there's, if you wanted to have a bodyguard, then all of a sudden it'd be some sort of, rhino or something,
Right.
kind of also reminded me of like in Robin Hood, the cartoon Robin Hood. Remember, Robin Hood was a fox, and
Okay.
he had some of his little John, I think, was a bear. And,
Sure.
so it is, I don't want to say a trope, but it is a common practice to say snakes are always being snakes,
Right,
like
they're
gorillas are always
sneaky.
just like powerhouses. And
Right.
but I can't think of when cats and birds and things have really kind of come down to a total humanoid body, right? Like,
Right.
they don't have wings and stuff. They just like really bring the sort of the head and the
Sure.
I guess just the heads.
Yeah. Like on the first couple of pages, they portray a gorilla as like a boxer. Like he's a kind of a veteran to it. He's got like he's been fighting for a while. He's a bit of he's been around the block. And Blacksad, he kind of goes to him and says, "Oh, I was bodyguard for this the person who just got murdered and stuff like that. She was an actress, I think, and she said, "Oh, I was around her, and it was okay gig. Liked her, respected her, but she didn't want she parted ways. But I know who she did hire. He was kind of scummy, but things like that. And they have this whole conversation, and you can just believe it
Yeah.
because we've kind of dropped the preconceived notions and just kind of believe like just the traits that go along with it.
Yeah. Like, yeah, he's talking to a gorilla, but okay, this is another step in his investigation.
Yeah.
And they even go into um, the story itself is uh, I don't want to say like they didn't pull any punches. I mean, the
Yeah.
story itself is there's murder and there's seduction and there's
Yeah.
really kind of racy drawings of female
Yeah.
like half cat women with
Yep.
exaggerated features, and
Right.
it's like,
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
all right, like it's they're trying to make it as riding the line as much as you can,
Yes.
and not make it a kids thing.
Right. Like all the walrus is like the head of the agency
Yeah.
that he's
That's
working
right.
for the police agency. That was kind of cool. Um, the stuff like that. Yeah. The lizard, he was like an assassin. So I was like, oh, that's
I
really
love that.
slick. And he's got like he's portrayed as like having black pants and like a green tie, and he's got little shank and stuff like that. And just trying to build that like ground it in reality in a
Y-
sense.
Yeah, well, and it kind of remind like so in the beginning of the hardcover, this collected edition, um, uh, comic book artist Steranko,
Yes. Legendary.
yeah,
Legendary
legendary.
guy.
If he says, "Hey, this was an awesome book," I mean, it's like you got the gold
Yeah.
star.
There was
Um,
actually a cool quote. When he goes and talks about the artist and stuff, he says, this is no easy task. Here's the universal equation. The easier it looks, the more study, the more practice, the more dedication it takes. And you can definitely see that in this book.
right, and another uh, good comment he made was that um, Blacksad had, or all of the anamorphics in this comic, they give expressions and they just sort of like turn their head or they kind of raise an eye or just the way that they're standing or the way they move, like it gives so much away of like what that character is. And
Yes.
even Stranko was saying that that's hard to do with just people, and
Right.
let alone now you're going to translate this from an alligator's perspective or
Right.
like a
You have to
turtle or a
totally
weasel or
put yourself
something.
in a different mindset.
Yeah, like how do you give that sort of subtlety of like, oh, that person looks like they are tired, or that person looks like they're uh, scared,
Sure.
and then here it's like a German Shepherd,
Right.
so
That's kind of like some artists have been doing just the same style or just trying to develop a style of just doing human and figures and stuff like that.
mhm,
Then try doing that same thing, but with animals and
yeah,
trying to appreciate the animal and all of their qualities, but also bring human traits into it and figure drawing with that.
and make it a good story and make it a well
So
colored.
basically, what we're trying to say is this is really unique, and we really want you to check it out and appreciate this. This is really a sight to see.
Now the first story, so we read the three stories, and then
Yes.
Andrew was like, "What's your favorite one?" And
Yeah.
I don't know, I still think that the second one, the Arctic Nation,
Yeah.
was pretty cool, because it sort of took all of the ideas of Black Sad and then put them into like, to me, like a real world setting, right?
Right.
Like you start hearing names in there. I think they mentioned like Gandhi at one point.
Mhm.
They mentioned like Truman. And so it's like, it's funny because, you wonder like, well, what did they look like?
Oh, sure.
So you get the idea that this is our world,
Yes.
but the characters have been replaced by animals.
Mhm.
And I didn't see other animals as pets, or you didn't see
No.
other like humans just like 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 they took over or something.
Sure.
So it literally is just our world and our themes and our history in an anamorphic world.
Yeah. And the idea is that these stories that they're telling are set in a post World War II world. We're not getting
Yes.
super modern, and not, I guess, before the 80s. Probably you want to stay probably late mid 50s,
Maybe,
maybe
yeah.
early
There's no
60s,
there's no
stuff
cell
like that.
phones and computers and
No,
things,
nope.
so
Very minimal technology. Maybe a phone booth. I think was like the
yeah.
biggest thing I've seen.
Well, and the cars are like normal sort of
Yeah,
cars,
yeah,
almost like a mashup of the like 40s and 50s, maybe, yeah, something like that.
sure,
Or it's just they're blending lots of styles,
yeah.
but the they the themes in Arctic Nation are um,
They're very heavy.
yeah, they're very white supremacy
Yep.
themes, and it says
Talking
like
about racial
no,
trauma.
yeah, no colored people allowed. But then when you see it, it's just like, oh, everyone in this like Aryan nation are like
Yeah.
are polar bears and
Yeah,
like
polar
white
bears, white
foxes,
foxes, and maybe like yeah, a couple other
white
white animals.
tigers. They had like a white
Yeah.
tiger, and
And he does that on purpose to make that point
yeah,
of like, here is like the thing that's like, that's not the KKK. That's kind of what it is.
well, and then you think too, it's like, okay, I especially like this story because um and not to go off on a
Yeah, go for
tangent,
it. Yeah.
but we like going off of tangents. So I
Yeah.
like this story because it gave light to the absurdity of racism, where you could
Yes.
say, hey, no white animals, and then you makes you think like,
Yeah.
well, what
When they
white animals are there in the world, right? So you're
sure.
like, polar bears, okay, great. And then
You
you
start
kind of look
putting
through
these
that.
together and you're like, okay.
Yeah, and then you realize like, well, that's just ridiculous because most animals have all sorts of colors all over the place, right?
Right.
But then you think like, well, so do people. So do people
Yeah.
have all different, all different styles and colors and types of races. So then it really, I don't know, it kind of just plays with your mind a little bit of like, look how odd this looks in this comic to say we are polar bears and we're the supreme race.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, that's silly because Blacksad is a black cat.
Yeah. And I was
Um,
thinking it was a panther at sometimes.
yeah,
Either.
I know. I got
had
that
those
too.
traits.
He talks about, but then he talks
Those
about having
about
9 lives, and you never really,
yeah, sure associate that with a
yeah,
panther so
like
much. I mean, they're
you
both
think
cats of
you think
sorts.
9
but,
lives is like a house cat.
right.
Um, but yeah, he does have sort of a panther feel to it, and
Right.
then he's got like a white
Yeah.
goatee, sort of,
Yeah. Which is kind of cool.
And then everyone's like,
I like
"Oh,
it.
look at you! You're not,
Yeah.
purebred or something." It was just like it was really funny. I don't know.
Right. But I definitely think if he wanted to approach like social issues the way he wanted to, this is a good gutsy story to like say, hey, take us seriously. This is a
Right.
mature book, but we're also taking on and tackling serious issues.
Yeah, and I do like that that wasn't their first story.
Yes.
So the first story
kind
was,
of weans you in.
yeah, like a pretty traditional
Crime noir.
whodunit,
Yeah.
detective, and he follows like the what was it, the Matchbox? He follows
Yes.
that to the nightclub. It's
Yeah.
very I don't want, like, uber traditional. So then you get the idea of the world, and you're not
Yes.
trying to piece anything else together.
Yeah.
And then the second
Trying to
story,
feel out the voice, the
yeah,
characters.
is Arctic Nation. So
Yeah.
I really did like that one. I don't know. It wasn't predictable. So I was,
Right.
worried if it would be predictable, but it was good.
Yeah. I guess I really like the first story is what kind of made me fall in love with the world and what the artist and the writer were trying to do. So I would say the first one's really good. I appreciate the third one, Red Soul. That was really good. Just the way he portrayed different themes in it and just different portrayals. This one, Red Soul, was about like nuclear energy and when that was being discovered, some of the atom bomb and like the different commentary around that.
And just like the lengths that
kind of
people
the
would
fallout
go
of like
to,
Nagasaki and things like that.
push their careers.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and you get the idea that not that so for that story, it set up for me that even beyond Arctic Nation, it set up that not everyone it's not a perfect world out there.
No.
So everyone is trying to pursue their own futures, and
Exactly. Or they were like trying to redeem themselves because one was like an evil,
Yeah.
like he was part of like the German scientists.
yeah,
during
it
World
was
War
like
II. And you would never guess it because he's an owl.
yeah,
And he is a very like generous philanthropic,
Philanthropic.
and he's just speaking and things like that. But he got kind of quieter because this like dog, this almost like Dalmatian kind of figure, is his like publicist and things like that. So
Right.
he really tries to like show him, make him bigger, and really publicize and market the crap out of him. And he's like, I'm just here to like solve energy issues. I'm not that trying to do anything big. But then you just come to find out this just keeps getting worse and worse and worse because all his friends are dying around.
Well, and every
Super
story
interesting.
progresses some new characters. So
Yeah.
like you get another story and it's like different animals. You're like, oh
Right.
wow, now there's owls, and then oh beyond that, okay, now there's um like the dock workers were,
Yes.
even just uh like weasels and things. And then there
Yeah.
was like the rooster, the rooster guy. It's like, all right, that's cool. I mean,
Sure.
it does expand and expand and expand, and you could tell that the stories must be coming pretty easily to the writers and artists. And for us as readers, we want to see all of that develop, of
Yeah, and he
course.
doesn't use, at least to my knowledge and just the amount of stories I've read out of here, he doesn't really duplicate any animals.
No, I didn't
Or
really
at least
get
he
that
does it, or at
feeling.
least maybe under the background, or if that, or you got to really focus on it. But all the characters he wants you to pay attention to in the panels, they're all unique. Which I'm like, that's pretty awesome and clever to do that, because everybody uses the same humans in the background, or we give similar features and stuff,
Yeah.
especially, again, classic Marvel Silver Age that I'm reading now. A lot of them look little similar features, it's like, okay, they had a little different thing here and there, but it's hard to distinguish when you're trying to build a world and unique characters. So I thought that was so clever.
Well, and even just, to touch on just the unique world that he is building. So from each panel on each page, that they do pack a lot into it, which is really,
Yes.
really fun for me because if you look at some modern comics, sometimes they've totally uh, erased or don't even draw the background at all.
Right.
They're just
Yeah.
focusing on these two people having a dialogue, and whatever's happening behind them, it's like blank. It's just
Right.
a color. It's like that's a blue background, and there's nothing in it.
Exactly.
They're just in the middle of
Yeah, he
nowhere.
really did a great job, like focusing on the environment
Yeah,
there.
like every time he goes into a new building or a nightclub or
Yeah.
like a park.
Even the classroom, like you can
Yeah,
see all the
right.
desks and chairs and things
Yeah,
like
or
that.
like he's, meeting women for a walk
Yeah.
down the garden and stuff. It's like it's really well done, and you get the idea too that um wherever they are, like New York, right?
Yeah, I would say it
I
would
think
be
it's New York.
something like that type of area.
He
There are
travels a little.
He
He's like
does,
in New Orleans right now,
yeah,
right?
yep, he does eventually travel there and out, maybe out west of California, or in like that aspect of the world. Because I think they're building like the Golden Gate Bridge in another story and things like that. So it is cool, like we don't get stuck in just one location after a couple
Mhm.
stories. Like we do get to see what else is out there.
Well, and like even just flipping through it now, I mean, almost every page has some sort of intricate background
Yeah.
or the colors that are painted. It's all
Yes.
watercolor, which is kind of what we found out, which was awesome,
Yeah.
awesome to hear and awesome to see that it's still that old school. Almost reminds me of like Harrow County a little bit,
Oh,
like
I
how
could see
that was kind
that.
of
I
put
could see,
together. Yeah,
just a different
the
artist.
tones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yep.
they're using. So it's not like super bold, it's not vibrant, and it's not like what you would imagine like um the X-Men would be or whatever,
Yeah.
it's really, really like almost each page is a piece of art. It's really
Yeah.
well done. And obviously, Alex Ross is probably one of the more common watercolor artists out there. But there are a lot of comics lately that I've been seeing are trying to put together like a real style like this.
Sure.
Like they're pushing the boundaries of what you would think a superhero uh, comic should be, where
Yeah.
everything's really defined and really
Hmm.
bold, where it's more of like some of the people in the background are just blobs of watercolor. And, you just get the idea that this is a bigger room than what you think it is.
Right. It gives them a lot more expression too. Absolutely. It brings the world to life, and makes it unique, unique style to develop and just be sucked into it. Like,
Well, like the seasons change, or like one
yeah.
times it's like raining or
Sure,
snowing,
or you
or
want to set the tone, like
yeah,
what
yeah.
time of day it is and things like that. You can really play with that more in watercolor, I feel like. So that was really cool, and like that just adds like the colors and things like that. Oh, yeah, it's just a great art style that they developed for this. It was really interesting and cool. Um,
So that
yeah,
was the first three. I read
yes,
number 4.
yes, the Silent Hill or Silent Hill. Yes, not
Yes.
not based on the movie. No, that one was more based around Americana like music and just how basically a artist who was kind of down on his luck, he wrote a couple big hits in a band. They kind of went their own ways, but he got hard times on like drugs and addiction and things like that. He was trying to make his comeback hit, and it kind of all fell apart. So
And
he's
again, I mean, he jumps right into these strong themes.
yeah,
There's heroin use. There's uh
family issues,
yeah. Yeah,
to say the least.
there's abuse. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, man, every story they just go from one sort of, I think they're looking at like cultural
Yes.
cultural
Issues and topics of the time.
yeah, like what can we approach in the comic that we can build this story around? Not that they're trying to solve it, and not that they're making a big statement about not doing heroin, but they are showing that this particular character is is not the best character for you
Yeah.
to think is a hero, right?
Yes.
There's no real heroes in this. Even Black Sad kind of like does
He's
what you
heroic.
expect, yeah, like okay, I guess I would have reacted that way, but he's not like overly saving an entire city. He's just sort of
No,
doing his
he
thing.
does defend like defend and trying to help the people he's trying to protect. He does do that.
Like he knows
He
what's right.
he's
That's
also
what he's
trying to
doing.
earn a living.
Yeah,
So
that's
when he doesn't, when he
right.
kind of gets kicked out, like the police department and is like a PI, he has to look for other work. So he'll do work for hire and things like that. He also like he'll punch first if he thinks he has to defend himself, or just hey, he's got to stop this bad guy. He's gonna pull that punch.
And they have guns. I mean, they do use guns and stuff
Yeah,
every once in a while, but it's not like
it's not a very big thing that they do,
yeah, it's
but
not like a storm of bullets that he's running
no.
through. It's just what you would expect. It's actually pretty low key as far as the violence goes. It's mostly just brawling and open threats, right? Like I mean, that's
Yes.
pretty much about
I
it.
guess even in the fifth volume, Amarillo, they have like this beautiful like yellow like Studebaker almost
Yeah,
that he drives.
I got just a few pages into that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's
If it
cool.
was if we weren't talking about these three volumes, that one was like, oh, it's so beautiful. um, but yeah, I just appreciate how effortless this was to read and just easy to get sucked into the characters and the world. Because I don't always get that all the time, so I always just cherish that feeling of like, oh, I just got to keep reading. And I like that these are short stories; that you don't drag them out.
Well, I was just gonna say, do you think that that's uh, um, would you attribute that to being shorter stories, or would you attribute that to being like a totally different world than anything we've ever read? Because
Oh,
sometimes these are nice to just, like you said, it is nice to just jump into a story and read it and not have to think like, are there 5 volumes before this that I should
yeah.
know about?
I think some of both. I appreciate that it's concise, and yes, we can tell we can tell a story that's not over a couple hundred issues, or a couple hundred pages for that matter. We can tell it from a start, beginning, and an end. And even though there might be like a character or two that'll come over to each story, I think that keeps our attention span a little bit more like glued to it and things like that.
Well, yeah, and like a part of me, like we've always said in the past too, when people say, "Well, where should I start reading Spider-Man?" And
Yeah.
it's like 1962, you should start. Um, I kind of like that this is just familiar enough that there's not that many inside jokes, and there's
No.
not that many like, oh, well, this is referencing a storyline from 1995.
Yeah.
Like there's it's not because that this series isn't old, it's 20 years old.
Right. It's
You
just the
know,
first.
it's just
It could be some of the first times that we're seeing it as an
yeah.
American
Yeah,
audience.
and it's reading differently, it's written differently, so that it's not always relying on every story building on top of each other. That, like you said, there are some recurring characters, which is fun, and I like that stories do that.
Yeah, there's a character named Weekly who's
Yeah,
like
he's
his like
cool.
sidekick, like news journalist.
Yeah,
They kind of like bounce ideas off each other and goes, "Hey, can you help me with this angle? Okay, I'll
and I
help you with
like that they don't treat each
that."
other like sidekicks and stuff. You know, it's
Yeah,
like Weekly kind of has his own.
agenda.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and like he is a journalist, so he is sort of chasing after the story, and he notices right away. I think that Blacksad is the sort of a catalyst for change, you know,
right.
and
Yeah,
so he's like, I'm going to follow this guy. He knows what's happening for real. You know, it's not too much digging. You just sort of follow you know, follow the action guy.
right. I'm trying to describe what do you think like the kind of animal he's supposed to be?
Well, I know I thought about that too. He's almost like a weasel.
Yeah, I think
Like
that was something that came to mind.
like
He's got a lot of features of it at least.
yeah, and he's short and he's kind of got like a weasel face. And I'm sure if we Googled it or something, that we could find out. But you know, it is fun just to read through and just like wonder like what exactly is this piece of it? Because he's got like a almost like a little derby cap and like a
Yeah.
I don't know. He's just kind of
Like a newspaper boy feel to it.
right,
Yeah.
like, and like almost like he knows more than he's telling. You know, like
Yeah.
he's there, but he also
He's always got the scoop on
yeah,
somebody.
he
Yeah.
also is doing this for himself. Like
Yeah. So
I'll help
ne-
Blacksad along, but
yeah.
actually it's because
I need more help on this story.
yeah, because the story will write
Yeah,
itself.
exactly. And that was such an interesting angle of like, here's a really cool character to like pair up with this detective.
Yeah.
Because you don't always see that all the time. I mean, you could see Batman and Robin just kind of relies on Batman most of the time, at least in the early days. So it was kind of like, hey, he can kind of stand on his own, but he also would like to work with Blacksad when he can, work with John. So that was such a cool pairing. I loved it.
I also like that Blacksad actually does get beat up quite a bit.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's not perfect and he's infallible and he gets hurt.
yeah, I mean, he throws like a punch too, and then like usually
it's
gets beat
bad.
down.
Yeah, he usually gets overwhelmed, beat down. Oh yeah,
I mean,
he has it rough.
he tries, he tries,
Yeah.
but he's still a cat. And they do kind of touch a little bit on his 9 lives idea. Like
Okay.
they touch on it in that one story where he's sort of rescued from the water.
Oh yeah, from
whereas-
yeah, it was like the end.
Yeah, it was like, oh, okay.
even
And
I think
then-
it was out in volume 4. It might have been in Silent
yeah,
Hill.
yeah, I think you're right. And
I'm still looking for that character. I'm like, oh, where is
yes,
he
I
coming?
mean, it was just a weird character popped up, saved him, and then he mentioned something about his 9 lives. So I think that
they might be playing a longer game too.
they can build on that. Like that idea would be very cool to be like as a cat, he has a little bonus that other people don't, you know,
Right.
or maybe he has sort of a guardian angel and that helps him along that he has
Yeah.
been unaware of. I mean,
You can put a
it-
little bit of fantasy
yeah,
in there if you
yeah,
want. to,
there's
just
quite a
little
few
bit.
little things, and it is cool, and
Yeah.
you get the idea that he's not afraid to jump into danger, but at the same time, you're kind of glued to the page of like, what the heck's gonna happen now?
Exactly.
You know, because if he got shot, you feel like, oh well. I mean, and that's the other thing is people get shot one bullet, maybe 2, and like
Exactly.
that's it. That's
a
all
lot
it
of his
takes.
love interest at the time. We're just,
Yes.
oh man.
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing.
or
yeah.
or they'll be the one that got away.
Yep.
I won't spoil anything with what happened.
He
there, but-
he tries. I don't think Blacksad is the marrying and settling down type. So we'll see what happens
yeah,
from here.
he has those desires he wants to, but I don't know if he can. Yeah,
So he's just kind of jumping around.
right. Okay, hot take or rapid fire. Who I guess do you would if you've seen this as a movie, maybe as an animated movie or something like that? Who would you want to voice John Blacksad?
Who to voice him?
Yeah,
Oh boy.
because we couldn't really do an actor. I mean, we could, but or just who do you think would do a great job?
Well, I you know it's kind of funny saying this, but I almost feel like Nicolas Cage would be
Yes.
a good one. 'cause
Right, that
he-
would be cool.
He almost has like that sort of off swagger a little bit where he's not super confident,
Right.
you know, or maybe like a Bruce Willis or something, because he kind of gives
Mhm.
that idea.
Yeah, I like Bruce
Ye-
Willis. Yeah,
yeah,
back in his prime, like, oh
yes,
yeah,
like a Pulp Fiction Bruce Willis, I think would be a good
sure.
one.
The other one I was thinking of was Sylvester Stallone when he was doing Rocky, like
Yes,
that area, and
yes.
Rambo and things like that. That's what the voice I read when I was reading these stories. I was like, that's the Sylvester Stallone voice.
I mean, I think we all kind of like, he is an action hero, but he
Mhm.
also is a brooding loner,
Yeah,
and
especially when he's doing his like monologues and things like
right.
that. I
And then
could
he goes
totally see
back to
that.
his own apartment and
Like when
just
he's doing
sits
like
there.
Rambo dialogue like, narration. I'm like, yeah, I can see that.
And then like the female drawn animals in this
Yeah.
are just like over the top female, but at the same time it gives a nice little break from
Oh yeah, and you also have
feeling
to
like a,
distinguish it too.
yeah, like you don't want it to be like a Blade Runner kind of comic, like you
Right.
want it to be at least a little like edge of there's happy,
Yeah.
people in this community.
Absolutely. Yeah, draw a family. What does young to old look like? Totally different. Yeah, all the expressions that you can get out of we could keep going on about this art because it's so much to digest from it. It's insane.
So I would say, I mean, Blacksad, yes, at first appearance, you might say, well, I don't really know what this is going to be like. So we can tell you it's mature, it's well written, it's really like the stories have a beginning and the stories have an end, and that's what I liked. It really wrapped up nice. So they do have quite a few different collected editions. We've got the hardcover. I
Yes.
read it virtually. You can read it on Hoopla, or you can read it on Comixology. Or no, Comixology didn't have it.
Yeah.
But you can find it even. I mean, it's
It's
pretty
still widely
common. Yeah,
available. It's affordable. We definitely recommend picking it up and checking out just some different European comics and kind of just expanding what is out there besides the big two or even
right.
some of our American publishers.
Well, and Dark Horse has a really good selection of all sorts of
Yeah.
side stories
Stories
and different
outside
kind
the
of, yeah.
countries or
Yeah, so you don't feel like you're
Fantagraphics,
just,
things like that.
if you're drowning in superheroes, come find Blacksad.
Yeah, great palate cleanser. Always appreciate a good one. And that's been another great episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour. This is Andrew Glonner
And Chris Ramos.
signing off.